On today's show, Houston Rockets general manager Rafael Stone's post-season press conference in which he addresses why Stephen Silas was ultimately let go by the Rockets, what the Rockets head coaching search is going to look like, what the vision is for the future and for the next person that is going to occupy that role. He also addresses some of the concerns over the Rockets culture that were brought up over the course of this season, as well as much, much more. We're going to unpack all of that coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian, a credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. I want to know what your confidence level is in Rafael Stone moving forward. Give me your comments in the YouTube comments section. Read those every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on the way to work, in the gym, on your lunch break, slacking off at work. Thank you for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day. We've got a jam-packed episode, guys. Rafael Stone's postseason press conference ran about 30 minutes long, so I had to condense it down to what I thought were the most important parts and takeaways as it relates to some of the important topics, right? Why Stephen Silas was let go, what the head coaching search is going to look like, the vision for this team moving forward. And then tackling some miscellaneous stuff like the Rockets culture questions that were brought up this season. Was Stephen Silas given a fair chance as the head coach? Will the young guys be involved in the decision-making process for the next head coach? Things like that. So we'll unpack all of that, but let's go ahead and dive straight in with our first little snippet here, because I've got about, I've got the most important snippets that I selected. However, there is a link in the YouTube or in the episode description, with the full press conference on my other YouTube page, the one where I post all the player interviews and all that stuff. So if you want to watch the full unfiltered thing, go click it, go watch it there. This is going to be excerpts and then, kind of my take on some of what Rafael Stone had to say. So let's go ahead and dive in. Why did the Rockets ultimately decide not to bring Stephen Silas back?
Why did you feel Stephen wasn't the right coach for you moving forward?
I think I was deciding whether or not I was going to change your question into the answer I want. I will answer your question, at least in part, which is I think we thought it was time for a new voice, and it is absolutely nothing to do with Stephen actually. Like, it's much more about, okay, we're kind of exiting one stage, entering another. What's the optimal way to go forward and trying to optimize for that. Kind of going back and not answering your question, but using it as an opening to say something I want to say. Working with Stephen has been amazing, and he is as good a person as you could ever hope to work with. And I hope that the effect he's had on me as a coworker is one I have on other people. And I doubt I actually get there, but that's like a goal of mine. He's a really good person. We've been really lucky to have him for the last 3 years.
Okay, so a couple things to unpack from that first answer. First part is a pretty cut and dry answer from Rafael, right? Just, very clear, concise. Hey, well, we felt it was time to move on. We're transitioning into a new phase, right? Into phase one of the rebuild, moving into phase two, and felt it was time for a new voice. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with that answer, right? That's actually exactly what's going on in Toronto right now, right? With the whole speculation around Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse is not a bad coach. Nick Nurse is a championship caliber coach. And yet the Raptors, he may have just run his course there, right? It may be time for a new voice in that Raptors locker room. And unfortunately for Stephen Silas and his tenure, his time here in Houston, it's it feels like it's time for a new voice, right? It feels like the organization is stepping into this new direction. And maybe you make the argument, oh, well, they should give Stephen a chance, right? He never got a chance with a real roster with veteran pieces. And, he's only been given this roster full of teenagers and he's had to tank and all this. Yes, and I get that. However, back to the point, I feel like there hasn't been enough done, or Stephen didn't do enough with the cards that he was dealt to have confidence in what he would be able to achieve with a roster that was built to win games, right? As opposed to a roster that was built to prioritize development and cultivating young talent and basically what he was given these last 3 years. And if the situation was different, then, and the Rockets didn't have this like onus on them to want to win games next season and be a materially better team, I'm stealing. When you hear that much Stone tape, you start to steal his words, and materially is one of his like favorite words to use. That's a buzzword for Stone. We should do a drinking game where every time you hear Stone say the word materially, you have to take a shot. Point is, when the Rockets want to be a better team next year because they don't own they don't own the pick that they owe to OKC, they want to step forward, they want to add veterans, all this. If there was things that you could point to that Stephen Silas had done where like, yeah, he's really good at XYZ, then maybe you make the argument, okay, he gets another year. He should have, another crack at it with a better roster. But unfortunately, with where the organization is at, they need to bring in, I feel like, A, new voice, which I agree with, and then B, they need a guy with some experience. They need somebody that can give this organization a facelift, some confidence, and kind of start changing the perception about things, right? Because right now the perception is if the Rockets rolled back into the next year with Stephen Silas, they'd be like, oh, well, this is same old, they're going to be bad again, whatever. Even if they make major additions this offseason, there'd still be major question marks there. But if you bring in a coach with some pedigree, that changes that conversation quite a bit. The other part of what Rafael Stone had to say where he basically said the quiet part out loud, which is hilarious because in all these interview settings with executives, coaches, players, ultimately, whoever you're asking the question to is going to decide whatever the hell they want to say, right? So it was really funny that Rafael basically said the quiet part out loud and was like, well, I'm going to answer your question, but then I'm also going to take a moment to say what I want to say, because so many times somebody that's at that podium in front of the microphone will be able to twist almost any question to answer and kind of segue into whatever honestly they have on their mind. We see it countless times over the course of a season from players, coaches, executives, whatever. So I just thought it was funny that he kind of addressed that and was like, well, I'll give you your answer, but then I'm going to take a second to say what I want to say. And he, took that time to compliment Stephen and really, basically explain how grateful he was for that partnership for these past 3 years. So I think some pretty cut and dry answer there about why the team decided to move on from Stephen Silas. Now, what does moving on from Stephen Silas look like, right? What is the vision for the next head coach? What are the goals for this team moving forward? And what does the head coaching search look like? We're going to start this discussion off with a pair of back-to-back questions from myself and our weekly co-host, none other than Ben Dubose, the podfather himself, asking about the vision for this team moving forward.
Hey, Rafael. When you look around the NBA landscape, there are a lot of teams that have found success playing different styles. 5 out, 4 out, 1 in, spread pick and roll, motion offense. Is there a specific style that you think works best for your core group of young guys, and how will that potentially impact your decisions as to the next head coach of this team?
That's actually a super interesting question. I think the answer is no. In other words, I think we have a very flexible group of guys who can do a lot of things well. So I think I haven't really thought about it in that way. We spent a lot of time thinking about where the NBA is going, trying to predict, trying to make sure that you don't plan for X and it turns out X is gone by the wayside and the only thing that's effective is Y. So it's not to say we don't think about it in that respect, but as it applies directly to this group, I guess I haven't thought about it as much. I do think we have a flexible grade, and part of it is because they're so young, they're not fully developed, and so the path along which they develop, I think, will for sure be hugely influenced by the coaching they receive, but also by what is effective in the NBA. Hopefully, if they end up being as good as we hope they end up being. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think that I don't think we're at all locked into a specific style.
To piggyback off of Jackson's question at the top about playing style, some of the more veteran coaches may have a certain way that they want to do things. How much going into this search is you guys identifying a style that you want to play and then looking at the coaches through that prism versus, I suppose, listening to the coaches about what they think is, best to optimize this group and then adopting your preferences to what their styles are?
Probably more the second than the first. Okay. But again, it's a lot of it is, okay, person X has a vision. How do we feel about being able to achieve it? How is this player going to fit into it? How is that player going to fit into it? And that's a discussion. That's Coach X saying, this is how I see it. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And we may need to bring in person Y from the outside, or not a single person. That would be crazy, right? But this type of player might be very impactful. Oh yeah, that's doable, right? And so we're looking, so somebody presents that type of vision to us, and we think it's really compelling, and we kind of buy it. And again, somebody, I think it was Kelly's question about like alignment. We're all behind it. Alignment doesn't just go top bottom. It goes the other way too, right? So we need to buy into what the coach is saying. So that is super important. He's like, I really think if we do this, we can be really successful. That needs to be really convincing to me. That needs to be really convincing to Tillman. That needs to be really convincing to our players, right? Kind of both ways. And when everyone's bought in, we have alignment. Now we can go after it, right? And if you have that kind of vision, that global vision that everybody can buy into, when things are rough, which they will be, the last 2 years have been rough, but every year is rough. No matter what team exists. I was on a team that won 65 games, and I think we lost 5 in a row that year. Everybody hits rough spots, right? And so when it's rough, you need to be able, that vision, that alignment is what pulls you through. And so, anyway, that's what we're looking to find.
Coming up, we're going to unpack what Rafael Stone had to say about the vision for this team, the team building process moving forward, and how the next head coach will be a part of that process to achieve the goals laid out by the organization. Plus, what are the qualities that this Rockets team is looking for in their next head coach, and how will the head coaching process look as far as how they're going to interview guys and what that entire process is going to entail. We're going to get to all of that in just a moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful, right? You're trying to go out and have a good time, whether it's to catch a game, maybe you're going to a comedy show, want to go to the theater or a live concert. You're trying to go out and have a good time. You shouldn't be stressed about it, right? Game Time can help you remove that stress, right? They've got flash deals and last-minute ticket offerings. It's easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. They've even got images of the seats on the app so you can figure out, exactly the bang for your buck that you're getting, right? Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. You get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, every kind of event that you can imagine. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. So with what Rafael Stone had to say about the vision moving forward, it doesn't sound like currently they are married to any one particular style of play. And it does really sound like they are very open to hearing and kind of essentially being pitched different styles from the head coaches that they'll be interviewing throughout this process, right? And that's important, right? The ability to kind of hear what these coaches have and the potential vision for some of these guys, right? Because maybe you bring in a Nick Nurse for an interview or a Kenny Atkinson, an Ime Udoka. They're all going to have probably very drastically different ideas and visions about this team and how to get the most out of some of these core guys moving forward, right? The way that Kenny Atkinson envisions Jalen Green playing is probably very different from how Ime Udoka envisions Jalen Green playing, right? Or maybe one guy has more of a defensive mentality for how this team is going to approach things on the court versus a more offensive-laden mentality. So being open to hearing those different possibilities is going to be really good for the Rockets front office because they might even be presented with ideas and things that they haven't internally considered, right? And that's one of the interesting things about this head coaching search is interviewing all these different candidates and bringing in all these different names is going to also help enlighten the Rockets front office as to things that they may not have considered, angles that they may decide to approach later on, and also making connections throughout this process, right? Guys that, maybe they'll interview with and maybe don't finish as a finalist, or, maybe they come back years down the line and again, similar to Stephen Silas, who interviewed in 2016 and then came back and became the head coach a few years down the line. So this interview process is going to be very important, just for a number of reasons, past just figuring out who the next head coach is going to be. But I did like what he had to say about the alignment idea of it too, where not only does Tillman have to be bought into what Rafael, the alignment works both ways, right? Up and down. Is there, the coach has to be able to sell the guys above him on what's going on, but then the guys above him have to be bought in to the idea of what they're trying to achieve. And when you get that organizational alignment, that organizational harmony, that's when you have something special building, right? The Rockets had that for a number of years during the James Harden era, from ownership to general manager to coaching to star player and James Harden, right? Getting all four guys lined up and on the same page. And for the most part, everybody has been lined up and on the same page throughout this rebuild. It's just the goals weren't championship. The goals were, hey, we're going to be bad. We're going to try and develop. And now, though, what is to be the alignment is going to shift as the goals for this organization ultimately shift. So what is it actually going to look like, though? What is the coaching search going to look like? We've got a few questions here that were asked by Jonathan Fagan, and we're going to run those back next.
More generally, then, what are the qualities or attributes you're looking for in terms of individual style, experience? What do you want to find in the next coach?
For the next coach? I think we want somebody who has a real vision for how to implement our young guys, how to incorporate some veterans, which we're for sure we're gonna be adding to the mix over this summer, but also over the next few years. And I think we're looking for somebody who has kind of a dynamic presence and vision, and they'll obviously have a new voice, and we want that voice to be one that we think is going to really resonate with our group. It's not formulaic. It's not like, oh, we need to get this exact thing. It's much more, trying to figure it out. I do think there's really talented people who are available right now, and so it'll be really interesting to hear what they have to say, when they come in, because we're just starting this process.
Kind of a two-part question. To what degree is it a priority or not to have a coach with previous head coaching experience? And with that in mind, in the past 3 searches, you guys put out a really wide net, talked to a ton of guys, a lot of assistant coaches who are up and coming, but maybe not going to be head coaches. This year, do you view the search as almost a competition with other teams to get a guy you might target? Or do you again put out a wide net and see what you think about a large number of candidates?
One of the reasons I think that they're really good candidates is because there are people I'm aware of who have been very successful in the NBA as head coaches, and they're available, right? Or at least they're not under contract with another team right now. So that's obviously interesting, and by definition, those people have prior head coaching experience, because until you do, how do you know that they don't, right? But I think there's validity and importance in putting out a wider net so that you get to know people, so that you don't rule anyone out just because they don't. So I do think we will interview people who have not had head coaching experience prior. I think you should, because again, you don't know what you don't know. Kind of one of the premise of my I guess it's mine, of my tenure here is we're not going to be outworked, right? And so I'm not going to just not interview people or not talk to them because they don't fit X and Y, but they might be amazing, right? We'll try very hard to make sure that we talk to as many interesting people as we can, and then and that's the goal. But there are really interesting people out there that have been very successful, and we'll talk to them too.
Just a thought that leaves out the compete to get the guy part of it. Until you decide he's your guy, why would you compete? So I don't know.
And I don't know who everybody else is going. Like, I just don't know. I don't, I would say we're not afraid to compete. Like, but it's not a situation where we're aimed at one guy and we're in a bidding war or something. And this isn't new news. Like, this is, but I do think that there are really qualified candidates out there that we're really looking forward to talking to.
So let's tackle that last part first of the answer, the competing for the right guy, so to speak. I guess there is a bit of maybe some concern with fans about like the arms race for getting one of these top coaches this offseason. And there is, the possibility that some ready-made contenders might be in the market for new coaches this offseason, right? If the Nuggets flame out or the Sixers, like Rivers, Malone, those guys might be out. And, then those teams might come in and want to scoop up an Atkinson or an Udoka or a Vogel or, grab a Nick Nurse, whoever else, right? So there is some concern on that front. But I do think that the Rockets have a really attractive position here because it's almost like a blank canvas for a coach to come in with a lot of young talent. They're going to have the cap room to make some serious acquisitions this offseason. They're going to be adding yet another top asset from the draft this season, or at the very least trading that pick if it's, in the lower range, 5 through 7 or whatever, or 4 through 7, and, making an acquisition that way. And the coaches that have the opportunity to come in here are going to be given kind of this, it's a really unique opportunity, right? To be able to take a team that's as young as the Rockets are, not quite like fresh, right? Because you're not at stage 1 of the rebuild. You're not going through the dark years. You're at the start where it's supposed to start getting exciting, right? The young guys are kind of going to be starting to come into their own. Jalen Green, Alperen, Sengun, year 3. You've got the crop of rookies who are going into their sophomore years now with Jabari, Tari, all that. So I do think as far as what the Rockets are trying to get out of their next head coach. I know Rafael Stone said he wasn't going to paint himself into a corner, that they're not like, stuck on some idea of like this coach has to have X or Y, Z, that kind of thing. And that they will, they're not completely hung up on the idea of, oh, you have to have previous head coaching experience. But I feel like for the Rockets perspective, they already tried that, right? They tried it a few years ago with Stephen Silas. They went with the unproven commodity, right? They went with the guy who had been an assistant for a long time, showed a lot of promise, and they gave him a shot. And I feel like based on some of the goals and the expectations organizationally for what they want to achieve next season, you can't take that risk again. A proven commodity is going to be the right way to go. And so I would be shocked if they wound up hiring another coach that didn't have at least some level of previous head coaching experience, even if they're completely blown away by the interview process. I think at this point, they very clearly, you look at all the names that have been linked and associated with the potential opening for the Rockets, it's all guys who have had previous head coaching experience because they need that credibility. They need somebody who can come in and kind of be that identifying marker of, okay, yeah, the organization is back on track, right? And that's going to help them as far, if you bring in a Nick Nurse or an Udoka, a type like that, then that's going to help you when you're, pitching to potential free agents, when you're trying to really flesh out and build out this roster, when you want to bring in those veteran pieces that are going to help shape things for the future. Having a head coach with some name recognition is going to do wonders versus an assistant that's maybe been, he's maybe had some success and, wants to make a name for himself, but that's a much harder sell, I feel like. And it's probably going to be a really hard sell for ownership at this point. Feels like, again, where the Rockets are at, they're going to be going after a name that has a strong resume behind them, and there are a lot of those guys on the market this offseason. Again, potentially some other, like, if Mike Malone is out as the Denver Nuggets head coach, I mean, hell, that could be an interesting name to take a look at. There are a lot of moving parts and possibilities this offseason for the Rockets. Coming up, I do want to hit on the culture note of the Houston Rockets, as well as some of the other kind of miscellaneous takeaways and thoughts that I had about Rafael Stone's presser. We're going to get there in just one moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, how about Joel Embiid to score more than 26.5 points? What about LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds? How about Kevin Durant to have less than 6.5 assists? Or what about Steph Curry to have more than 3.5 3-pointers made? So what is Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA. They've got you covered for all of the action. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. They're safe. They offer fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's go ahead and dive into our final clip here of Rafael Stone that I've got picked out for us, and then some other miscellaneous takeaways from what he had to say throughout the course of the presser. So him answering the question about the Rockets, the state of the Rockets culture as it pertains to some of the outwards perception of what's going on here in Houston.
Over the last few months, kind of the culture of the organization has come under fire, whether it's former players or media. How do you respond to some of that, and can you change the perception? Is it only just winning? Is that how you change the perception?
Trying to think of a PG way of saying this. Some of the stuff out, like first of all, there have been a couple of things. It hasn't been a lot. Secondly, a couple of the people are just out of their mind. And so what I would say on players is players are entitled to their thoughts, and it's fine. And we've had a ton of people come through here over the last 3 years, and the vast majority of them have had amazing experiences. And I think if you're around, you talk to the guys in this locker room, we have a really good culture. We have not managed to turn that culture into wins at this point in time. But culture, I would put our team up there with anybody in the NBA. We work really hard. People are very supportive of each other. They get along very well. They spend a ton of time together off the court. A lot of that's the function of their youth, which is also one of the reasons why we've struggled to win. Like, it's all interrelated. But I am willing to fight with anyone who will say that our culture on this team this year, it was challenged. It's been, if not the best team I've ever been around, certainly one of the top 2 or 3, and I've been in the NBA since 2005. As it relates to the media people who've said it, I would say that some of them have been lazy. I think that there were a lot of things that were written and said about, and I was a part of these teams, so I don't want to walk away from it, but teams when I was not the GM, those teams were very successful. They did things in their own way. I think some people didn't like the way they did them. And so I think one of the things that's happened is that complaints about the way that those people did things are being conflated with us now, even though the only commonality is it's the Houston Rockets. The players, coaches, front office has changed hugely. That's my perception. So that's my answer to that question. Like the real answer is I don't think there's validity to that. Our culture is we work really hard and we support one another. And I think this team has done that very well. So and that is largely a function of Stephen and what he's done on that. Because that's a culture in particular is a very coach-driven thing. And I want to give Stephen his credit. I think he did a very good job on that front.
Okay, so Stone addressing some of the concerns over the Rockets culture, and he's like, no, culture incredible, flying flawless colors. Well, then, and he even credits Stephen for that culture, right? So then why is Stephen being let go? Like so help it make sense. And I think this is at least how I think it's kind of being, or at least how I'm perceiving things. I fully agree with everything Stone said. Like this group of guys, they all love each other, right? It's not like a fractured locker room like player X hates player Y or whatever. Like, no, it's none of that. They love each other. In fact, I've said on this very show had times like, the relationship between Jalen and Kevin, and they're like brotherly, whatever, twin, like that. I think that's actually at times detrimental to Jalen, and where he's, at times willingly deferring to Kevin too much on the floor, stuff like that. Clearly, this group of guys, they love each other, they work hard, they're very supportive of each other, all that. I think it's very clear the disconnect and the concerns maybe for the culture is they are a very young, immature group of guys. So even if they are supportive of each other and they work hard, all that stuff, the disconnect is coaching, I don't think, was getting through to them. And that's why when you go back to Stone's earlier comments, well, why are you moving on from Silas? Well, we felt it's time for a new voice, right? Why would you need a new voice? Why else would you need a new voice if players are not responding to the voice that's currently there? So I think that it's very possible that the Rockets do have a good culture in certain regards, and then the bad culture is more just, again, kind of a side effect of the fact that this team is incredibly young. They don't know who they are as players. Like, these guys are still in there formulating, like they don't even know who they are as human beings yet, let alone NBA players when you've got 19, 20, 21-year-old kids. And I think that Stephen, unfortunately, is just the wrong coach and is ill-equipped to be the guy to steward these guys into who they are going to be as NBA players. They need, I think, again, a more heavy-handed, firm, direct approach to be able to be held accountable, right? To make sure that, what the coaching staff is saying is not falling on deaf ears, because we've seen over the course of this season, a lot of the concerns and negativity, whatever, culture stuff spill over onto the court, right? Whether it's, guys reverting to bad habits on offense and, selfish tendencies or whatever. Defensively, not engaged on defense, not getting back in transition, not playing hard, the complaining to the officiating, like all that. Like, those are all very clearly issues of culture, right? Those are all signs of immaturity. And those are things that were not able to be ironed out by the current coaching staff. So that's why you're adding a new voice to the locker room. That's why you feel that a change needs to be made. So I think it's very possible that both things can be true. That the culture currently is good. Guys are playing hard. They're trying to get better, all that stuff. But then simultaneously, there's other elements of it that are not good, and that's why a change was needed. Last little clip that I've got here teed up is Stone actually being asked about whether or not Jalen and Jabari would have any input on the next head coach.
Of course, you spoke about how young your team is, and you have some young players like Jalen Green and Jabari Smith that can become stars but aren't there yet. Will they have any input into the next coach that you bring in? Will you have any conversation with them about that?
No, I don't think that's fair. I worry even when you're talking about like 30-year-old men that it's a little unfair to put them in a position where you're saying, hey, what do you think about this guy? So no, I think I know those guys really well. Organizationally, I'm not making this decision in a vacuum. We know these guys really well. Will we be factoring in how we think that they will help these guys grow into the players they can become? Of course we will. But I don't know that it's at all fair to put it on them and say, hey, what do you think? I just don't think that's fair, at least in this stage in their career. So no, I don't anticipate doing that.
So I actually really like this answer from Rafael, because it would be the wrong approach, right, to cater at this stage to Jalen or Jabari, or hey, what do you think about this head coach, or how do you like this guy, right? Because organizationally, right, you need to know these players and understand like what a potential head coach is going to be able to get out of them, and kind of a fair representation of their interests and how to get the most out of them moving forward. But it's kind of like, again, if the dynamic was different, like when the Rockets had James Harden and they went out and got Stephen Silas, Silas is like the perfect coach for a superstar talent like James Harden, right? A guy who can just kind of let James be James and kind of build success around that one star. That's why he had so much success in Dallas with Luka. So, and that's why he was the successor to Mike D'Antoni. Whereas this group of guys, right, we don't know who these guys are as players yet, right? Like, we don't know what Jalen Green is going to become. We don't know what Jabari Jr. is going to become, or even is right now, right? These guys are still, they're still cooking, right? They're still in the oven. And for a new head coach to be able to come in and have a direct impact on the progression of the career of a guy like Jalen or a guy like Jabari, that's going to be huge, right? It could be let's draw the parallel to the Golden State Warriors, right? Mark Jackson had Steph Curry first, and then Steve Kerr walked in there and turned Steph into a perennial all-star. Now, maybe that still would have potentially happened had Mark Jackson continued coaching this team, but Steve Kerr stepped in and had a vision and delivered on that vision for Golden State in a big way. And that's what the Rockets are hoping to achieve here, right? Is Stephen had his philosophy, his approach to this team, and again, given the constraints that he had, it wasn't a roster that was built to win games. It was incredibly young, like all that. They feel it's time for a change of direction, right? For a new voice. And whoever that new voice is hopefully going to be able to elevate not just one player, but everybody on this roster, right? And get the most out of these guys. And I like the idea though that it's, again, you're not going to put that pressure on a young guy like Jalen or Jabari to say, no, like, well, what do you think about this candidate? I think it was a good answer from Rafael. Also want to highlight here, to wrap things up, this one note that no mention of Kevin Porter Jr. at all whatsoever throughout the entire press conference. He mentioned Jalen, Sengun, Jabari, Tari, KJ, Tate. Now, it's worth noting that he brought up a handful of those names unprompted, and then he was prompted later on to talk about the development of the rookies this season, and that's when he brought up Jabari, Tari, and Tate. I think at that point it was the second reference for Jabari and Tari, and then Tate was the first time that he brought him up. But just, I find that a bit curious, right? That, at no point when talking about how, the young core of these players would respond to a new head coach and the vision and all these different, all the different, answers that he gave, at no point was Kevin's name mentioned. So make of that what you will. It's probably too early to be reading into the tea leaves on that front. But again, Kevin's future is one of the biggest questions of this Rockets offseason, right? Will he be the point guard again next year? Will he be moved to the 3 spot? Is he going to be coming off the bench? Will he even be a part of the team next year? So the fact that he wasn't mentioned at all during the exit interview or the postseason interview by Stone is interesting, to say the least. That's all I've got for you from this one. Just initial preliminary thoughts on some of, I think, the key takeaways from Stone's press conference. We're going to be revisiting some of this with our weekly co-hosts, hearing thoughts on what Stone had to say from Ali Kambajani, from Ben DuBose, hearing what those guys think about how the season has wrapped up and what Stone decided to, some of the messages that Stone decided to give to the media in his postseason presser. So be on the lookout for those. But as always, of course, thank you for checking out the show so much. Really appreciate it. Again, free and available wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app. Free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Give me your thoughts on what Rafael Stone had to say in his presser. Share with me how you felt about what he said, his vision, his goals, the head coaching search, all of that. Let me know in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.